More details are emerging of a Coast Guard chase that ended in tragedy and became a flashpoint in already strained relations between China and Taiwan.
Activism on wheels. Cyclists take to the streets to support Tibet. Free education. That's the latest effort to get more people in Taiwan to have children. Plus,
Taiwan and the Netherlands celebrate a complex 4-century-long relationship at the Taipei International Book Exhibition.
Hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Thanks for tuning in. 2 Chinese fishers who were on board a boat that capsized near the Kinmen Islands are blaming Taiwan's Coast Guard. The incident last week killed 2 of the 4 crew members on board their fishing boat. The survivors returned to China on Tuesday, and in a video released by Chinese media on Wednesday, the 2 survivors said that the Taiwanese Coast Guard vessel caused their boat to capsize by colliding with it. Taiwan's Coast Guard says the incident is still being investigated.
死者家属的伤痛，我们深切体认，也将全力协助家属处理后续事宜。于家属抵京后，即向家属完整说明相关案情。另案发后，海巡署亦秉持不偏不倚、勿枉勿纵原则，将全案交由司法机关调查。
Now, reporter Rick Lauer has been following this developing story from Kinmen. He spoke with local councillor Singapore Airshow to find out how the island's roughly 100,000 residents are reacting to the spike in tensions.
Well, it's obviously an incredibly tense time here in Kinmen. We've heard a lot about what Taiwan thinks and what China thinks, but could you tell us about how the people here in Kinmen feel during this current situation?
那当然，民众多少会紧张。那其实我觉得，当然最担心的可能是我们金门这边的渔民了哈。毕竟渔民出海作业，只想要说求个温饱，希望能钓几条鱼，然后能够有一个正常的管道，能够卖到大陆地区去。那发生这种事情的话，不管是大陆方面，或是我们这边的话，多少会比较警戒哈。那也担心说可能会有意外或冲突。那我们当然是希望说。 大家能够平下心来来看待这次的事件，不要再擦枪走火，引发其他不必要争执这样子。
So here in Kinmen, we're just a few kilometers from the Chinese coast. We can see the Chinese city of Xiamen here, and we can also see there's evidence here of like previous conflict between China and Taiwan. Can you tell us how Kinmen is different from other parts of Taiwan?
其实我们可以看到，其实厦门就距离我们那么近哈。那当然在语言讲话啦宗教信仰啦等等文化上面，当然会比较对等于相邻的地区，包括经济圈哈。那可是呢，现在金门的整个治权还是在中华民国。当然，我们这边的民众也还是希望向往这种所谓的民主自由的一个生活。可是经济圈的这个影响很难去脱离，因为真的距离真的太近了，这个样子。
So over the last couple of days, we've been speaking to residents here in Kinmen. We've spoken to fishing people, and a lot of the voices we hear are saying that people feel helpless, caught between the big governments in China and in Taiwan. As a person from Kinmen, what would you like to say to the central governments of China and Taiwan during this situation?
我希望两边政府都互相冷静一下哈。从这次的事件根本去解决金门渔民出海捕鱼，还有一些非法这个捕鱼作业的一些问题，包括说一些渔获销售管道的一些问题。那也希望就是说，在这次事件之后。 两岸能够有一套好的政策，彼此释出善意。我相信这样子对台湾跟对中国，包括说对金门的居民跟渔民，才是一个最好的一个方向。这样子才不会影响到我们这边自己本身的民生经济，又让大家过得比较紧张。这个样子。
That was our reporter Rick Lauer talking to Kinmen councillor Singapore Airshow about the current situation there. Activists in Taiwan are writing in solidarity with Tibetans, promoting the Tibetan language on International Mother Language Day, amid a crackdown on the language by the Chinese government. Tiffany Wang reports.
These activists are cycling throughout Taipei to bring awareness to the Chinese government's suppression of the Tibetan language. The event comes on International Mother Language Day, which aims to promote linguistic diversity around the world. Speaking in front of Taiwan's education ministry in both Tibetan and Mandarin, the activists say China's campaign is an attempt to crush their culture and heritage.
Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Sonza Yana Mashunki Tapju Dembe Sijutone Preji Geda Yigi Cheda Rishung Pegi Koru So Same Tanda Tashimbe Nega Pegi Nedan de Tada Che Zadada Nyendan Jendo Yuriba.
There are over 6 million Tibetans living under repressive conditions in China, and an estimated 1 million Tibetan children are forced to enroll in Mandarin language boarding schools. Human rights groups say this also erases their Tibetan identities. Advocates have been jailed for promoting the language, and Tibetans are worried that their language could die out. They say it's part of a larger crackdown in China on minority languages, which they call a violation of their right to education and to their unique ethnic identities, something they hope to counter by speaking out proudly in their native languages here in Taiwan. Alex Chen and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
To find out more about how the Tibetan language is being repressed, Ro Hughes spoke to Peng Xuan Li, a board member with the Students for a Free Tibet, Taiwan.
So how is China suppressing the Tibetan language? What kind of tactics are we seeing?
So regarding the oppression on the Tibetan languages, I think Tibetans, they basically being oppressed in all spectrum, I would say, like from their culture, from the religions, and also like language is one of the very important aspects. So it is actually oppressing from the very beginning, from the education level. They are basically receiving Mandarin Chinese education. They are not getting much resources on how to learn Tibetan properly.
This isn't the first time we've seen these kind of tactics. So how effective have they been?
Very successful, I would say. The PRC government, they announced that they're going to implement the so-called bilingual education to all these ethnic minority areas around the country. It sounds like a good policy that they're going to protect their language and so far, so forth. However, it is actually used to implement further Mandarin Chinese education to these communities because there was only the mother tongue education at the beginning. They only use Tibetans, they only use Uyghurs or Mongolians to educate their kids, while like Mandarin Chinese as like a second language. But now they have to use both, and you can just play around the percentage, right?
How are communities reacting to these tactics? What are they doing to keep their language and their culture alive?
First of all, of course, protest is a really important mean. Not only people inside these area protest against the authority, their diaspora also protest and do advocacies around the world. And another thing, which is more cultural, more less, like movement-wise, it's they're having some weekly activity called Lakar. They use Lakar means white, literally means White Wednesday. So there's just like a lot of culture things inside it, but they basically use every Wednesday to glorify their own cultures and languages. So if you are a Tibetan inside Tibet, you would only try to speak as much Tibetan as possible on Wednesday. You eat Tibetan food, you dress in Tibetan dresses, you buy in Tibetan shops, so on and so forth.
That was Ro Hughes speaking with Peng Xuan Li, a board member for Students for a Free Tibet, Taiwan. A public kindergarten in central Taiwan is offering spots to firstborn kids for free. This initiative is meant to combat Taiwan's low birth rate. Sally Jensen has more.
Hungry to learn. For these kids, breakfast is always on the house. They're among a select few who get to go to kindergarten for free. Fuxing Township is the first in central Taiwan's Jianghua County to fully subsidize preschool tuition for firstborns.
很好啊，鼓励大家生小孩啦好像说给年轻的父母没有后顾之忧。
As it stands, only second and third born children are eligible for tuition-free public early years schooling in Taiwan, while most fee-paying spots go for around $30 a month. But faced with low birth rates and a looming population crisis, some local governments are trying to encourage would-be parents to have babies.
这几年因为结婚的比例一直在降低这些年轻人，尤其说他们的结婚年龄比较晚，还有就是说人口外流也是一部分我们希望说把这些年轻人留住照顾你的孩子，减轻你们的负担这个是我们的一个规划跟想法。
Starting this semester, the initiative will cost the local government at least $30,000 annually. But with just 13 kindergarten classes available for Fuxing's 230 preschool-age kids, inquiries from interested parents have been off the charts.
许愿度蛮高的，然后也在粉丝专页私讯我们也蛮多位家长的。像这学期我们就真的十几位小朋友进来这样子，对，也将近快20位。
It'll take several years to see if Fuxing's new policy has the intended effect of increasing the town's birth rate. But if it does, local governments around the country will be watching and learning. Scott Huang and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Bookworms are gathering in Taipei for the International Book Exhibition, featuring the Netherlands this year. Reese Ayers was there.
3, 2, 1, press the button in front of you.
A sea of books and book enthusiasts. The 2024 Taipei International Book Exhibition is underway. More than a chance to catch the hottest novel or meet decorated authors, the event celebrates literature as an important medium in democratic societies.
I think literature is the ultimate way of freedom, actually. It's the freedom to travel, freedom of gender, freedom of expression, freedom of thinking.
There are authors from all over the world at this year's exhibition, with books that explore themes ranging from diversity to the digital world. But the guest of honour and the main theme of the event, greeted by President Tsai Ing-wen herself, the Netherlands. Taiwan's complex relationship with the Netherlands goes back exactly 400 years, to 1624, when Dutch colonialists ruled over parts of Taiwan for almost half a century. And that colonial past is something Dutch guests at the event are eager to confront.
Also in the Netherlands and elsewhere in the Western world, people are reassessing colonial history, and we're doing the same in the Netherlands. So I think it's good that we have that opportunity to look at the cross-cultural fertilization that took place, but that we also do introspection in regard to the negative, the shadow sides of our presence here 400 years ago.
Radna Fabius, born on the island of Curaçao, also colonized by the Dutch, writes about colonialism and race issues in her poems. The event was a chance for her to reflect on the parallels between countries that suffered from colonialism in the past.
I think the situation is different in the Caribbean and the relationship is also different, but since it's the same country that arrived around the same time, there will be similarities and there will be things to talk about that will be relevant to both parties.
Dutch author Joyce Bergveld, who spent time in Taiwan as a teenager, was also at the event with her book Lord of Formosa, a dramatization of how Dutch colonists were finally driven out of Taiwan. It's a story she hopes can educate people in the Netherlands about their own past.
In Holland, people hardly knew that we'd ever been in Taiwan with the Dutch East India Company as colonists. And in recent years, there has been more focus on our colonial history, on slavery.
The event is about more than examining the past, though. It's about looking forwards, about how literature can be a link between nations with shared values.
The hope is that we'll meet together with authors and publishers, that we'll learn from each other, and of course we hope that a lot of Dutch literature, which is a very interesting literature, will be translated into Taiwanese, and of course maybe vice versa, so we can learn from each other.
Providing a platform for cultural exchange and reflection for readers and writers alike. This event is the beginning of the next chapter in the two countries' centuries-long story. Klein Wang and Reese Ayers for TaiwanPlus.
And coming up after the break.
We're here at the Singapore Airshow, where China is unveiling what it's calling its first made-in-China jet airliner. We take a closer look.
过人生的话，你发现说我们大部分都是爱美的。
我自己少遇见一朵花，我可能就不是这个样子。
开始思考什么叫做一个本土性。
大声的唱出来说我是台湾人。
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Dozens of aircraft are taking to the skies for the Singapore Airshow, the largest in Asia. Many countries are looking to show off their latest aviation tech, including China, which is debuting a brand new jetliner. Jaime Ocon reports.
This is the C919. It's China's first domestically made narrow-body passenger jet. This type of aircraft is used to transport millions of people around the world every day. Planes from European and American manufacturers Airbus and Boeing make up more than 90% of China's passenger fleet, but this new aircraft, manufacturer Comac, is hoping to change that. Here at the Singapore Airshow, the C919 is flying for the first time outside of China. Singaporean officials say they welcome the latest country to take part in the show.
So it's the first time we will be having exhibitors from China. And this basically is positive, encouraging early signs of seeing Chinese companies from the aerospace industry participating in the economic activities here in Singapore.
On the sidelines of the event, China's Tibetan Airlines signed an order of 40 C919 jets, but the aircraft has yet to get an order from overseas. The first C919 was delivered in 2022 to China Eastern, but today only 4 are in service, and the aircraft is still seeking approval from aviation safety agencies outside of China. But that's just one issue facing the aircraft. While the C919 is China's first domestically developed airliner, many of the systems aboard the aircraft are not made in China, and that's led some to question whether China has all the technology needed to truly make an 100% made-in-China jet. In fact, a majority of the components used, including the engines, parts of the tail and landing gear, as well as the flight control systems, are all made overseas. That means that any disruption to its supply chain due to political or economic events could make building the plane almost impossible. Comac declined any media interviews at the Singapore Airshow. In many ways, now is an ideal time for Comac to enter the market. American giant Boeing has struggled in recent years with safety problems plaguing one of its best-selling jets, the 737 MAX. But the C919's path to commercial success is far from guaranteed.
Industrial partners should be aware that when you transfer something to China to co-produce, you lose control of that technology. And I think that's the situation with the CFM LEAP engine. But without those kind of certification, and right now it doesn't have enough hour to really allow the Western side to accept certification of that aircraft for safety reason. But I don't see how they can become a true competitor of the Airbus and Boeing.
With Airbus and Boeing long dominating the aviation industry, Comac is hoping the C919 can be a viable alternative for international airlines. The Chinese company says it'll expand production in the next few years, but it'll have to overcome stiff competition and geopolitical headwinds if it wants to get off the ground. Chris Ma and Jaime Ocon in Singapore for Taiwan Plus.
Australia is set to more than double the number of ships in its navy.
Right now, the Royal Australian Navy has 11 warships. As a result of the government's response to the Surface Fleet Review, today we are committing to take that number to 26.
Canberra will commit an extra $7 billion to its defense budget for this plan. It's the latest move by Australia to beef up its navy in recent years, following the signing of the AUKUS Defence Pact with the UK and the US in 2021. That deal will provide Australia with nuclear submarines. Now, to learn more about Australia's naval revamp, our reporter Ed Moon spoke to Matthew Sussex of the Griffith Asia Institute.
Australia has committed to more than doubling the size of its naval surface fleet and spending an extra $7
billion US dollars on defense. Can you tell us why it's made that decision? And has Beijing's increasing naval power in the region got anything to do with it?
This is the government responding to a sort of surface fleet review, which came out of the recent Australian DSR, Defence Strategic Review process, which really said that Australia needed to reorient around a maritime and littoral type of defence force, and saying that its current armed forces really weren't fit for purpose. So the reason for this massive upsurge is, of course, fundamentally linked to China, but it's about also addressing a regional environment which I think pretty much everybody can appreciate is becoming quite dangerous, quite complex, and quite fluid. The revamp includes, in fact, downscaling some of the frigates that Australia was going to be buying, the Hunter class frigate. And going for something, a design that's a bit lighter instead, but capable of carrying, more missiles.
Will Australia's beefed up Navy allow it to work more closely with the United States?
They're fairly interoperable already. It's interesting to note that the review of the Australian surface fleet was conducted by a former American admiral. So it just goes to show how close those ties are. I think the desire from Canberra is to have as close as possible integration with US warfighting as possible, but also, to some extent, I think as well, having a big enough naval fleet that can stand up, to medium-sized regional scenarios. Whereas in the past, I think one of the criticisms that could be levied at Australia is that it may have talked loudly, but it carried a relatively small stick.
The South China Morning Post recently reported that the US has got 5 carrier fleets operating in the Pacific, which is 2 more than it usually has. Can you tell us why you think the US has decided to beef up its presence in the region?
I think it's designed to send a message to both Beijing, as well as allies and partners, and potentially also to Pyongyang as well. And I think the message to Beijing is, don't forget that we are a very sizable military power, that we have a large number of aircraft carriers, and that we can deploy 5 out of 11 within the Indo-Pacific theatre. Now, the message I think it's attempting to send to allies is one of reassurance, where the United States has been certainly very interested in and actively involved in what's been going on in the Middle East. And with an election year coming up and jitters about the types of commitments that the United States might make to friends and partners.
That was reporter Ed Moon speaking with Matthew Sussex, a defense analyst at the Griffith Asia Institute. Taiwanese baseball player Yu Chang has signed a minor league contract with the Tampa Bay Rays in the U.S. That contract includes an invitation to the Rays spring training, letting him compete for a spot on the team's major league roster. 10 teams reportedly offered Chang similar deals, but he chose the Rays, saying he feels the most comfortable there. Chang played for the Rays in 2022, batting .260 with 3 home runs over 36 game appearances. Taipei's National Museum of History is open once again after years of renovation. John Trieste takes a look inside.
With the entrance of a mascot, a 5-year wait comes to an end. This is the National Museum of History, one of Taiwan's big cultural institutions. Here, ancient treasures like this bronze piece that inspired the mascot's look rub shoulders with the work of modern masters. And today, it's reopening to the world, with a fresh look thanks to extensive remodeling. This isn't just a home for historic objects. It's a century-old building that's grown and changed with Taiwan. After the Chinese Civil War, large numbers of people fled to Taiwan to escape the victorious Chinese communists. They brought with them cargoes of precious Chinese art, bronzes, pottery, painting. They set up a government in exile in Taipei, claiming to be the legitimate government of China. What had been an art museum got a new mission, promoting these claims on the world stage.
1970年代国立历史博物馆随着国民政府来进行文化外交，来配合整个台湾国家的软实力文化外交的推动，然后推动了所谓的中华文物箱，来推到海外，来宣传台湾是真正的中华文化的传承的基地。
These treasures from China still make up the bulk of the collection today. But Taiwan has changed in the decades since then, and the museum says it's caught up. Gone are old walls that box visitors in. It's now all about open spaces. And fresh new displays show the museum's own history and how it's changed over the decades.
我们希望能够呈现的是由承传流变，这70年来史博馆跟台湾的民众一起走过的岁月，所以包括了我们馆藏的重要的文物，还有书画的作品。在这里的大家呢，其实包括了书画艺术大家，还有台湾的你我大家的共同的典藏故事。
The changes are already winning fans. New ones, like this group of school children on a field trip, and old, like this amateur painter who's been coming to admire the paintings here for decades.
我感觉是很清新、很亮丽，他的这个这些感觉上啊是比较新颖。
It's been a long renovation, but the museum is proud of its new style. With a big reopening out of the way, it's ready to reclaim its place among Taiwan's top attractions. Leon Lian and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us this evening for TaiwanPlus News. Follow us on social media to get more of our reports on the go. Finally, check out these pieces made by South African artist Esther Malangu on display at the National Gallery in Cape Town. I'm Eric Gao. Have a great evening.